Hi there, I'm Caitlin, and in 2016 I was in a car accident that left me paralyzed from the armpits down. Sounds kind of crazy, and it was, but it's also cool to talk about sometimes too. So I figured why not start talking about it? Um, the idea all came to me back in October of 2024 when I was taking a studies in the short stories class. I had an assignment where I had to write a short story, so I wrote about my accident. My teacher, my peers, and basically everyone that's read it has said to publish in some kind of way, and I'm not sure how to go about that, so I figured this video would be a good idea too. I'm gonna use this short story of mine as like a timeline to stick to so I can remember the whole incident in chronological order, because it's very hard to do that sometimes. Not sure where to start at here. I guess I should start at the fact that it was that it all started really a few days beforehand for me. I had went on a little mini vacation with my best friend, my mom, my dad, and my little brother down to the shore down at the campground that we had a lot at. We decided to go down for the weekend for a few days. Everything went cool. No problems there. My best friend had gotten a ride back with somebody else, and I had gotten a ride back with another family member of ours that had come down and stayed at his own camper at the campground. So I got a ride back with him on the 23rd, and didn't get home till around midnight that night. So I remember that my cell phone was on about 20%, so it was going to be dying within the next, probably half hour or so. So I needed a cell phone charger that was going to work, which I did not have at the house. So I wanted to go to Wawa to get a cell phone charger and a pack of cigarettes. I threw on my new hoodie, a pair of leggings, and my old Target sneakers, and decided to go to Wawa. That was at about 1:20 in the morning, I think it was. And if you know anything about little old Salem County, New Jersey, there's barely any street lights anywhere, so it's very hard to see sometimes when driving down some back roads that we have. So just keep that in mind. Got to the first stop sign, no problems. Got to the second stop sign, had a text message. Checked the text message, replied to the text message, and went to toss my phone onto the the passenger seat. It bounced off the seat and landed on the floor. I didn't think anything of it because I figured I'd be at Wawa in about another 10 minutes anyway. But that ended up being a slight issue later on too, as well. So I continued down the road for about another 2 minutes, and that's when everything started going a little haywire. It just suddenly looked like the lines in the road just started disappearing, like it was just pitch black now all of a sudden, like nothing. I couldn't see over top of this pitch black wall, couldn't see underneath it, couldn't see side to side. It was just a pitch black hole. It was crazy. But as I got closer, I realized it was not a black hole, but a massive tree. A huge tree had fallen across the road, blocking both lanes. I barely had time to react. I slowly applied pressure to my brakes, hoping it was good enough. My hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I did I did lock my elbows, despite what is suggested, unfortunately, which is probably why I broke my wrist. Can't really see it too well there, but yeah. So anyway, I felt the jolt and single shake of the impact before I fully realized what was happening. But I do remember everything. The sound of the leaves swishing across my car, the jerk of the car stopping, and the deafening silence that followed. Besides my struggling breathing, the silence was overwhelming. It felt like forever, though it must have only been about 20 minutes in total of me being stuck in the car. But in that 20 minutes I realized the truth. I was paralyzed. I could not feel or move anything from anything from at least the waist down, but figured I would find out the truth about my injuries soon anyway. I could feel my heart racing as I sat there trapped, paralyzed inside my car, every second stretched out endlessly. The realization of my paralysis weighed heavily on me, mixture of panic and disbelief. Just as I began to comprehend the enormity of what had happened, I saw a flicker of light over top of the windshield off to the right. That's another crazy thing. About 3 months prior to my accident, some really good friends of mine had gotten into a pretty serious accident and nearly escaped an explosion of the car. So when I saw a flicker come off the hood area of my car, I panicked and instantly went into believing that the engine was about to blow. So I got really scared and really panicky. For a moment, my heart leapt into my throat. 3 months earlier, my friends had narrowly escaped an explosion, and now I feared I would meet the same fate. But then I saw it more clearly. It was just a flashlight. My panic eased slightly, but the fear of my situation remained. I was trapped, immobile, paralyzed inside my car, and entangled in the branches of the fallen tree. Using what little breath I felt I had left, I screamed silently, praying that whoever was holding the flashlight could hear me. "Hello, I am trapped inside my car, inside the tree," I yelled, my voice straining with every word. "I am coming," a voice responded, and at that moment a wave of relief washed over me. The next thing I knew, I found myself talking to a state trooper, as though we had known each other forever. Oddly enough, this state trooper wasn't even supposed to be checking out my situation or the tree. It had actually been reported several times throughout the night that this giant tree had fallen down in the road, but nobody had gone to check on it yet. So this state trooper decided that on his way home from work, he would check on it for everybody. If it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't have been found at all. He recognized the urgency of my situation and knew he had to help keep me conscious. His calm presence grounded me amidst the chaos, offering a brief sense of peace. He had already radioed for help, and I could feel some of the tension begin to ease, but I knew the most terrifying part of the ordeal was still unfolding. As we talked, I began to notice that it was becoming harder to breathe, each word more difficult than the last. Panic crept in once again. "Listen," I said, my voice scarce. It's getting hard to talk and breathe at the same time. The trooper nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. Can you hold my hand? I asked, desperate for something, anything to keep me grounded. Without hesitation, he reached through the small crack in my driver's side window, one that had been left open when I had been smoking a cigarette earlier. His large hand enveloped mine, offering the reassurance I so desperately needed. As long as I'm shaking your hand, I'm awake, I said, trying to reassure him as much as myself. Okay, I understand, he replied, his voice steady, anchoring me in that moment. I could not tell how much time had passed before the rest of the first responders arrived, nor could I remember what was said amongst them as they assessed the situation. Everything around me felt like a blur, as if I were watching it unfold on a screen, like it wasn't my life hanging in the balance. What I did know was that they had made a decision. The best way to get me out was by leaning me back in the driver's seat and pulling me through the back driver's side door. That's when the rescue plan began. The roar of engines filled the air. The first responders yelled to keep communication flowing. I felt the sharp pain of a large piece of bark lodged in my eye, and the overstimulation was overwhelming. I didn't know it was a large piece of bark at the time. I just felt something in my eye, and it hurt so bad. My mom told me later on, after the accident, that it was a large piece of bark that had gotten inside my eyelid. It was so bad. All I could think about was the agonizing wait to get out of there. Just get out of the car, I kept telling myself. That was my mantra. Do not pass out until you get out of the car. Again, it all seemed like a movie, but the commotion was unmistakable. The sound of machinery as they cut off my back door, the feeling of relief in my broken neck when they laid my seat back and placed their hands around me. That was the greatest feeling of relief I've ever had in my life, because that's, I don't know how else to explain the pain in my neck that I had other than to say that it felt like a kinked neck, really bad, like times a million. So when they laid me back and my neck could be straightened out, it felt great. The feeling of relief in my broken neck when they laid my seat back and placed their hands around me. The feeling of discomfort in my broken neck when they placed a neck brace around my neck. I was pulled from the wreckage, from the crumpled remains of my tan Saturn, and carried to the ambulance. Somebody please call my mom, or she's going to be very angry, I yelled for what felt like the 10th time that night as they put me into the back. As I lay there disoriented and in shock, I noticed several familiar faces. That was something that was kind of cool. I knew most of the paramedics there because I was a cashier at the Wawa that I was heading to. And almost every single morning or almost every single night, the paramedics would come through to get coffee and stuff like that. So I would ring them out at the front cash register. So that was kind of cool that I knew all of them. I noticed several familiar faces, paramedics who had often come through the Wawa I was headed to that night. I know you guys, I said, excitement spilling out despite the situation. They each gave me a strange stare, clearly not recognizing me. Oh yeah, one of them asked, raising an eyebrow. I quickly explained that I worked at the local Wawa for at least the last 2.5 years, the same one I'd been driving to that night. I rambled on about how I ended up in the accident, desperate to share some sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. They all nodded, but their faces were still filled with skepticism. Then came another round of tests. That's kind of crazy. I was so hyped up and like the adrenaline was pumping through me that I was just yap, 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 yap. So they thought that I was actually like on drugs or alcohol or something. So they kept testing me. Then came another round of tests. It was the third and final time that they had checked to make sure I was not impaired. They did not believe me, thinking I was too hyped up to not be under the influence of something. I could feel the tears welling up in a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. It stung even more knowing that just 3 days prior I had celebrated my 21st birthday, and now I had no reason to celebrate anything at all. I remember asking, are we headed to Salem Memorial Hospital? It was the only place that felt both safe and familiar in that moment, where my mom had worked for at least the last 20 years. I desperately needed a familiar face that felt like family to ground me as the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. I felt the rising need for comfort, to see someone who would know how to calm the storm that was building inside me. Unfortunately, my injuries were too severe for Salem Memorial, so they had to chopper me out to Cooper's hospital. The disappointment hit hard, but there was some relief in knowing I was out of the car and in the hands of professionals. Yet, despite the small comfort, an unsettling feeling still turned in the pit of my stomach, an uneasy mixture of fear and the unknown. The next several hours blurred together. I vaguely recall being lifted into the helicopter for my first ride, and the rush of the wind as the blades spun above me. But more than anything, I remembered the receiving nurses at Cooper. They were amazing, their calm and capable demeanor wrapping me in a strange sense of security as my world continued to spin out of control. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to see my family. I longed for their presence, but I also knew the sight of my injuries would be distressing for them. Trying to maintain some control over the situation, I turned to the nurse and said I only allowed them in if they promised not to cry. I knew that if anybody was going to cry around me, I was going to lose it, and I didn't want to do that, so I made sure that whoever was coming near me was strong enough to not cry. I knew my mom could hold back her tears and be strong in such times. I need that strength from her now more than ever. The next thing I remember was the soft touch of her lips on my forehead, grounding me in the chaos. "Mom," I said calmly and despite the storm inside me, "I think I fucked up." She chuckled softly, her voice steady. "Yeah, Kate, just a bit, but it's alright, we'll get you fixed up." In that moment, her reassurance felt like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. The next month flashed by in a completely medicated stupor, a blur of doctors, nurses, endless tests. It wasn't until that I was leaving Cooper for McGee Rehab that I was reminded of the physical remnants of that fateful night. "Where are my clothes?" I asked my mom, still in the neck brace, unable to move much beyond the slight turn of my head. That's something that's crazy. I really did want my clothes from that night because it was a brand new sweatshirt I had just gotten. But unfortunately, they didn't include my clothes. Because they cut them off, obviously, because they had body fluid on them, I guess. I don't know. I don't really know why they did it. Because they said that there wasn't any bodily fluids anywhere. But yeah, they cut it all off, and all I got back were those old gray Target sneakers, which, whatever, it is what it is. I can buy a new sweatshirt anytime now. I'm just thankful that I have what I have. Because of my level of injury, I'm not supposed to be able to breathe on my own or have hand function. So to have that, I'm very grateful for. Okay, well, that's my story. If you have any questions or anything like that you would like to talk about, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you've gotten to the end of this, thank you for listening to my story and giving me a chance to tell it in a way that makes me feel comfortable. yeah, thank you. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and continue to spread joy. Um, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.